You guys have been asking for an updated ranking of the jets in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the wait is finally over. My work schedule hasn't been ideal for making new content, but I finally got some time off. I've added a few new jets to the list that have come out since the last time I ranked them, however there are still more in the marketplace that I didn't test. Reason being, these jets start to add up real quick if you buy every single one of them, so 15 was enough for me. I put these jets head to head in 5 different categories: speed, max altitude, difficulty or ease of use, flight performance, and then my opinion of the aircraft. I tested each jet's speed between 100 and 300 feet above sea level for maximum air resistance, and went from a maximum altitude climb and a controlled descent, only leveling off to regain speed if it could. For ease of use, I ranked the jet's difficulty level to operate and maintain flight, and I scored handling based on how responsive or lazy the jet is in both high and low speed turns. Each category will have 15 points because 15 jets, and will have a maximum possible score of 75. Let me know how you guys have ranked these jets in the comments, and be sure to give this video a like to help it out. Without further ado, let's get into it. At number 15, yet again, is the A4 Skyhawk. This plane has been out for way too long for it to still be this terrible. This plane feels more like an underdeveloped freeware, and I do not recommend anybody buying this jet. It still has a massive twerking problem while turning at virtually any speed, it is extremely hard to keep flying in a straight line, and does not resemble in any way its real-world counterpart. It feels more like a 25-cent pony ride for kids at the local supermarket than a jet used as an aggressor in the first Top Gun. For the scores, it landed a 3 for being the third slowest. It did get 10 points for reaching an altitude of 67,400 feet, but for both ease of use and handling, I gave it a combined score of 0, just out of principle. I also give it bonus points of 0 because I still cannot believe Microsoft is allowing this to be sold in their marketplace. Hopefully it gets maybe 13 or 14 more updates in the future, but seeing as about how long it's been out and it still hasn't gotten one that makes it better, I'm not going to hold my breath. For the 14th jet, it's the MiG-29 Fulcrum. I was really excited when this jet first came out, but I immediately noticed a lot of glaring issues with it. The flight model is extremely unstable, and it acts like it's flying with its own rules of physics. As you'll see in this video, this jet spins out for no reason at all anytime you ask it to do anything above minor turns. As far as graphics, it doesn't look terrible, and it comes with a healthy variety of liveries to choose from. For points, it landed an 8 for reaching a speed of 762 knots at sea level. For altitude, it scored another 8 for reaching 59,200 feet before stalling. And just like the A4, I scored it as 0 for both ease and handling, just out of principle. There is no reason for releasing paid jets like this that are underdeveloped and expect people to buy it. Finally, I awarded 0 bonus points, giving a total score of 16 out of 75. I'll recommend you to buy this plane when they make it feel less like a car driving on an icy road with ball tires and more like something that was meant to actually fly. Coming in at number 13 is the A10 Warthog. This jet is a lot of fun to cruise around in the mountains with, or just to do some formation flying with your friends. One issue I've had ever since it was released, which just like the other jets was a long time ago, is no matter what I do, every time I jump into it and hot spawn on a runway, the aircraft is fully powered down and I have to go through the full power up procedure every time. Sometimes I just want to jump in and go flying right away, especially if me and my friends are doing a convoy, but I can't do that in this jet. Let me know in the comments if you've had the same problem or if you found a workaround. The A10 reached 531 knots, scoring at 4 points, and hit 38,100 feet before stalling out, giving it 3 more points for altitude. For ease, I gave it a 2 just for having to start it each time I want to fly it, and it scored a 10 for handling. I gave it a bonus 10 points because once it's in the air, it's a good bit of fun to fly around. The total score for the A10 is 29 out of 75. At number 12, we have the MB339. This is one of the slowest jets on the list, but it makes up for it with how fun it is to fly. Even with that, it's still fairly nimble, making it one of my go-tos if I'm doing something that requires me to fly a little bit lower and a little bit slower. I made a tutorial a while back on how to turn on and use the smoke trails in this jet, so if you haven't watched it, I'll leave a little card in the top right corner for you. The MB339 is a good-looking jet, and there are several liveries to choose from. This is the second slowest jet, so it scored 2 points for reaching a top speed of 474 knots at sea level. It was, however, able to climb to 46,700 feet before stalling out, giving it an additional 5 points. For ease, I gave this jet a 7 because I feel like I'm adjusting the trim more than I'm doing anything else, and for handling, I gave it a 6. I gave it an additional 10 bonus points because it's a lot of fun to do smoke trail aerobatics in, and overall, the MB339 scored 30 points out of 75. For number 11, we have the L39 Albatross. This jet is only available through the Reno Air Races DLC, but you get a couple different liveries for the A variant as well as a few other race variants with the DLC. Although it doesn't look like a military jet, the real-world version has served in both a trainer and combat role for various countries. This jet is very slow and does not retain its energy very well at all, and it can be very unforgiving if you fly it too hard. I would fly this jet more often than I do if it was a little bit faster. I personally have an addiction to speed, and this does not do it for me. This ended up being the slowest jet on the list with a top speed of 375 knots, giving it just 1 point. For altitude, it scored a 4 for reaching 38,700 feet before it stalled. Things change when we go into the next categories, because I gave it a 10 for ease and an 8 for handling, since this jet is very manageable if you keep the speed up. For bonus points, I gave it a 9, landing the total score for this jet 32 out of 75. Starting the top 10 is the Berdok F22 Raptor. This jet should be way lower on this list, but because of its speed and ability to climb, it won points that it absolutely should not have. This jet has a long way to go before I would fly it more often, and it still feels like it needs some visual and handling updates. I'm just not that impressed with how this plane handles, and I really don't like the inside cockpit view, as everything inside there looks very arcadey. But if looks and feel aren't something you're worried about, then this jet might be fun for you to cruise around in. This was the second fastest jet in the sim, reaching a top speed of 1,045 knots, giving it 14 points. It also got 14 more points for reaching an altitude of 88,800 feet before it gave up. I gave it a 10 for ease since it really doesn't take much effort to fly it, but I gave it a 3 for handling because of how far off it is from the real thing. Finally, I gave 0 bonus points, giving it a total score of 41 out of 75. I just have a hard time taking this thing serious and considering it an F-22 in the first place. At number 9, it's the Su-57. Just like the Raptor, it feels very arcadey and underdeveloped. It has come a long way from its initial release though, and if you remember what it was like from day one, then you know what I mean. The Su-57 isn't very immersive, and I struggle to find any sort of interest in it. I do appreciate the fact that the developers have worked on making it better, but it still needs a lot of love. I do see a lot of people still flying around this jet, so I know there are a lot of people who still enjoy it, but I'll stick to my top 5 for now. For speed, I gave it 12 points for reaching a top speed of 885 knots, and 6 points for topping out at 67,300 feet before stalling. Keep in mind the speed and altitude points are only based on how it did compared to other jets in this list in the simulator, not in real world accuracy. For ease, I gave it a 10, and handling it also got a 10. I awarded 5 bonus points, giving it a total score of 43 out of 75. This jet would easily go into a higher spot if the developers put a little bit more work into this and made it a little bit more realistic. I know I'm going to pay for this in the comments, but at number 8, it's F35 Lightning II. This seems to be a community favorite, but I just can't get on board with loving it. I would most likely recommend this as maybe a second or third jet for new users. It does, however, seem to be the only jet that you can do a proper launch from a carrier, so I'll give it props for that. It upholds the Fat Amy nickname by being very lazy in the turns and does not seem to want to accelerate when you need it to. I do think they did a good job on making it feel realistic, but I think it needs a little bit more thrust to weight for it to be more accurate. It only reached a top speed of 646 knots and reached a maximum altitude of 56,200 feet. It is very user-friendly regardless of the level of experience you have, so I gave it a 14 for ease, but for handling I gave it a 9. I gave it 11 bonus points, but would definitely be lower if it couldn't do the carrier launch. Overall, the F-35 scored a 47 out of 75 possible points. At number 7, it's the F-15. This is another jet that's come a long way since its release. It seems to no longer stall out in the middle of a rate fight or lose control rapidly when changing roll directions. It does still get a little unstable fairly often though, which keeps this jet from getting any higher on this list. The F-15 is a visually stunning aircraft, and it's the first on the list to actually make me feel like I'm flying a real fighter jet. I believe it's fairly accurate to what it can do in real life, minus the fact that it's one of 4 jets that climbed over 130,000 feet. I'm not sure if that's an F-15 issue or a Microsoft Flight Simulator issue, but it shouldn't do that, needless to say. For speed, it reached a more realistic 764 knots at sea level, giving it 9 points, but for altitude it got 15 for its unrealistic ceiling of 134,000. I scored it 12 points for ease and 8 for handling. I gave it an additional 5 bonus points because even though it's decent at flying, I'm just not in love with it. Overall, it scored a 49 out of 75 possible points. Coming in at number 6 is the T45C Gosshawk. This has always been one of my favorite jets in Microsoft Flight Simulator because of just how good it is at everything. This is a great substitute for the Xbox users that want but can't get the Hawk T1A. This is undoubtedly one of the most beautifully rendered jets available right now. The Gosshawk flies just as good as it looks, and I highly recommend everyone getting this jet at some point. It does need a fair amount of trim put in it just to keep it flying level at high speeds though, but as soon as you get it right, it's going to fly perfectly straight. And as expected, it's on the slower side with a top speed of 557 knots, giving it 5 points. It was able to reach a ceiling of 47,200 feet before stalling out, giving it 7 more points. For ease, I gave it a solid 12 because of the trim management, and handling I gave it a 13. As expected, I gave it 15 bonus points just because of how good this plane is. So total, it gets a score of 52 out of 75 possible points. Starting the top 5 is the FA-18 Super Hornet. This jet received a Top Gun 2 Maverick livery with the recent release of the movie, as well as a bunch of flying and landing challenges in the form of a DLC. You can't really find anything bad to say about this jet, except that maybe it needs an update to be able to do carrier launches in the future. The Super Hornet is extremely capable of whatever it is you want it to do, and I would probably recommend this as a first jet to any of the newcomers. This jet will do most of the work for you, and I would say it's the easiest to fly in the simulator right now. It reached a respectable 698 knots, giving it a score of 7, and topped out at 68,100 feet, giving it 11 more points. For ease, I gave it a 15 since this jet is going to do most of the work for you, and a 14 in handling. I gave it 13 more bonus points, landing in a total score of 60 out of 75 possible points. By far though, for beginners, I highly recommend you start with this jet because it is so easy to manage and so easy to fly, you're going to love it. At number 4, it's the Eurofighter Typhoon, aka the EF2000. This jet used to be my number 1, but with them taking away the insanely unrealistic space shuttle capabilities, it quickly fell down my list. I know it was gimmicky, but I do miss its old capabilities. This is still a great jet to fly and has received a lot of stability and visual updates since its release. It now flies less like a rocket and more like a 4th generation fighter. It comes with a variety of liveries, but some of them are just plain corny. That said, it's still the reigning speed champion on the list with a top speed of 1,205 knots at sea level, giving it 15 points. It also still loves to climb, just half as far as it used to with a ceiling of 134,000 feet. For ease, I gave it a 12, and handling, I gave it an 11. I miss it being comically unrealistic, so I gave it 10 bonus points, giving it a total score of 63 out of 75. In the 3 spot comes the F14 Tomcat. This used to be my number 1 choice, but has since been dethroned by the top 2, which we're about to get into in a minute. The F14 is a speed demon and it handles like it's on rails until you start overstressing it, then it feels like you're re-entering the atmosphere, which I can only assume is realistic for any jet. It has been and always will be one of my all-time favorite planes. Let me know in the comments if you're like me and you grew up with this as your favorite jet thanks to the movie Top Gun. For speed, the faster B variant reached 815 knots, giving it 11 points. Again, unrealistically, it reached 134,000 feet and was still trying to climb, giving it 15 points. For ease, I gave it 14 points and another 14 for handling. I gave it 13 bonus points only because the top 2 impressed me more. The F14 got a grand total score of 67 out of 75 possible points. At number 2 and tied for first, it's the only jet on this list that is not available on Xbox, the Topmach Studios F22A Raptor. The only reason this is not in the number 1 spot is because they didn't make it available on the Xbox. I have both, but I hate that you have to own either a medium or a top-end gaming PC just to run the sim and then to fly this thing. It is by far though my new number 1 go-to for any type of flying that I do. Be sure to check out how ridiculous this thing's super maneuverability is in the card in the top right, and let me know what you think in the comments. For speed, it reached 920 knots, giving it 13 points, and it climbed a respectable 73,000 feet, giving it a score of 12. For ease, I gave it a 14, and handling, it gets a full 15 points. I gave it 14 bonus points with a total score of 68 out of 75. This jet alone should be enough motivation for you to go out and get a gaming PC, but if you do, once you fly this thing, it's going to be hard to fly anything else in the simulator. In first place, it's my number 1 choice for all users in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it's the F16. This jet takes everything I wish the F14 could do, and it does it better. The F16 is very much a hypercar with wings, and it will constantly blow you away with all of its performance. It's stunning to watch in both the first and third person views, and I cannot find any flaws in it. I highly recommend everyone get this jet if you haven't done so already. It will make your flight simulator experience just that much better. For speed, it reached 795 knots, giving it a score of 10, and it climbed to an unrealistic altitude, again, of 134,000, earning it 15 points. For ease, I gave the Viper a 14, and handling, I gave it another 14. Finally, I awarded max bonus points of 15, giving the F16 a total of 68 out of 75 points. Thanks for checking out this video, and please let me know in the comments what you think about this list and how you would rank them all.